It is often supposed that prayer exists as a means by which we persuade the divine to alter circumstances according to our preference. This assumption, though common, is mistaken. The purpose of prayer is not to instruct God, but to align our own hearts with truth, to cultivate a spirit of trust, and to discipline ourselves in patience. A man does not pray to inform the omniscient of his needs, rather, he prays that he himself may be shaped by his supplications. A child asks for what he desires, but a wise father does not always grant his child's every request. If a child were given all he asked for, he might consume only sweets and neglect the bread that sustains him. Likewise, if our every petition were granted precisely as we wished, would we not grow into creatures of folly rather than of wisdom? The necessity of prayer lies not in its ability to secure immediate answers, but in the manner by which it transforms the one who prays. To pray is to acknowledge our own insufficiency and to place our trust in a wisdom greater than our own. It is to accept that the world is not under our control, nor should it be, for our understanding is but a candle to the sun of divine knowledge. Why, then, do we pray if the outcome is already known to the Almighty? This question betrays a misunderstanding of the nature of both prayer and providence. The hand that holds the stars is not absent from the affairs of men, yet it does not force its way into a heart unwilling to be shaped. Prayer is not meant to change the decree of heaven, but to refine the soul of the one who prays. There will be times when the heavens seem silent, when prayers appear unanswered. In such moments, the unwise conclude that they have not been heard. But silence is not the same as absence, nor delay the same as denial. The divine, who knows the end from the beginning, may withhold in mercy what we demand in ignorance. If we trust only when we are indulged, we have not learned to trust at all. The discipline of prayer is not unlike the training of a soldier. It requires perseverance, humility, and obedience. A man does not cease to eat because he has dined once, nor should he cease to pray because he has prayed once. It is the continual practice of prayer that sustains the soul, even when the lips are weary of speaking. Let us approach prayer not as a means of demanding what we desire, but as an offering of ourselves to be shaped by the hands of wisdom. Let us not measure its power by the immediacy of its results, but by the transformation it brings within us. For in the end, the power of prayer is not that it changes God, but that it changes us. Prayer, at its core, is not a mere ritual or a superstitious act intended to manipulate the divine. It is not an incantation that forces the hand of the Almighty, nor is it a transaction in which we present our requests in exchange for divine favors. Rather, prayer is the soul's communication with its Creator, the lifting of the heart toward that which is higher, greater, and infinitely wise. It is the avenue through which the human will seek alignment with divine purpose. Many perceive prayer as a means to change external circumstances, but its truer function is to transform the one who prays. The individual who approaches prayer merely as a tool to achieve personal desires misunderstands its essence. Prayer is less about altering the external world and more about the reformation of the inner world. A man who prays does not necessarily change the events around him, but he inevitably changes himself. In the act of prayer, pride is subdued, selfish ambition is tempered, and the soul is refined. This conversation between the created and the Creator is neither one-sided nor redundant. Some argue that if God is all-knowing, then prayer is unnecessary, for he already knows what is needed before a word is spoken. But prayer is not for God's benefit, it is for ours. A father does not require his child to ask for daily sustenance because he is unaware of the child's needs, but because the act of asking cultivates humility, gratitude, and trust in the provider. In the same way, prayer trains the soul to acknowledge its dependence on divine wisdom rather than its own understanding. Prayer is not always verbal. It is not confined to words spoken in solemn tones or poetic phrases. The deepest prayers are often wordless groanings of the heart that language cannot capture. A man burdened by grief may utter no formal words, yet his silent suffering, presented before God, is a prayer as real as any spoken plea. The soul's longing for truth, its search for peace, and its desperate cry in moments of despair, these too are prayers. Another common misconception is that prayer should always be an emotional experience. While it is true that prayer can stir deep feelings, its power does not lie in the intensity of emotion but in the sincerity of the heart. A man does not cease to breathe simply because he does not feel the air in his lungs, nor should he cease to pray because he does not feel an overwhelming sensation of holiness. Some of the most faithful prayers are offered in moments of dryness, when the soul prays out of duty rather than desire. In such moments, the very act of persevering in prayer shapes the character and strengthens faith. In its highest form, prayer is an act of surrender. The one who prays does not dictate terms to the divine but seeks to be molded by divine wisdom. A wise petitioner does not merely present requests but submits to the response, whether it be yes, no, or wait. This is not resignation, nor is it passive acceptance. Rather, it is the recognition that the one to whom we pray sees beyond what we can perceive. When a man prays for strength, he may not receive immediate relief, but he may find that perseverance is built within him. When he prays for deliverance, the answer may not come in the form of escape but in the form of endurance. Prayer is not restricted to moments of crisis. Many fall into the habit of approaching God only in times of distress, treating prayer as a last resort rather than a continual practice. Yet, the man who only prays when he is desperate has not yet understood prayer. Just as a relationship cannot thrive on occasional communication, so too the spiritual life cannot flourish if prayer is reserved for emergencies. True prayer is a constant conversation, not an occasional appeal. The man who prays daily, not out of necessity but out of love, finds his soul shaped by the very act of communion. The nature of prayer is deeply connected to faith, for one does not pray unless he believes that there is one who listens. Yet faith in prayer does not mean certainty of outcome, it means trust in the one who holds the outcome. Many abandon prayer when they do not receive the answer they expected, assuming that their requests were either unheard or ignored. But prayer is not a mechanism for securing predictable responses. It is, rather, the process by which we learn to trust even when the answer is hidden from us. The man who persists in prayer despite uncertainty is the one who truly understands its power. Prayer is both a privilege and a responsibility. It is not a mere obligation imposed upon the believer but a gift through which the soul finds its proper place before the divine. To pray is to acknowledge that the world is not sustained by human effort alone, that there is a wisdom greater than our own, and that in communion with that wisdom, the soul finds its peace. Prayer is often mistaken for a transaction, a means by which one presents requests in the hope of obtaining a desired outcome. This view reduces prayer to a mere tool for achieving external change, as though its purpose were to persuade the divine to act according to human preference. But true prayer does not function as a mere petitioning system. Rather, it is the instrument by which the one who prays is changed, refined, and brought into closer alignment with the truth. The greatest effect of prayer is not on the world outside but on the heart within. A man who prays regularly will find that over time, his prayers themselves begin to change. At first, he may pray only for what he wants, comfort, success, relief from trouble. But as he continues in prayer, he begins to realize that his desires themselves are being reshaped. He begins to ask not only for provision but for wisdom, not only for deliverance but for endurance, not only for blessings but for the strength to be a blessing to others. His heart, once focused on selfish concerns, becomes attuned to something greater. This transformation is not always immediately perceptible. A man does not notice the growth of a tree as he watches it, but over the years, he sees that it has reached toward the sky. Likewise, the soul that prays is shaped gradually, often without realizing it. The one who kneels in prayer day after day, even when he feels no great stirring of emotion, will one day look back and see that he has been changed. He will find that patience has taken root where once there was impatience, that humility has replaced pride, and that faith has grown where doubt once held sway. One of the most striking effects of prayer is its ability to humble the heart. A man who does not pray often assumes that he is in control of his life, that his successes are the result of his own effort, and that he alone determines his future. But the man who prays learns otherwise. In bowing his head, he acknowledges that he is not the master of his fate, that his wisdom is limited, and that there are forces beyond his understanding. Prayer teaches him to rely not on his own strength, but on a greater power. This humility does not weaken him, rather, it frees him from the illusion of self-sufficiency and opens him to true wisdom. Prayer cultivates discipline. To pray consistently, especially when one does not feel inclined to do so, requires perseverance. It is easy to pray when one is in distress, when the soul cries out for help. But to pray in times of peace, to maintain the habit of seeking communion with the divine even when there is no immediate crisis, requires effort. The man who prays regularly learns self-control, for he must set aside time and commit himself to the practice even when distractions abound. Over time, this discipline extends beyond prayer into other areas of life, shaping him into a person of steady character. Another remarkable aspect of prayer's transformative power is its effect on perspective. The one who prays begins to see his circumstances differently. A man who does not pray may view his hardships as meaningless suffering, a cruel turn of fate. But the one who prays sees them as opportunities for growth, as moments in which he is being strengthened. He learns to trust that even in difficulty, there is purpose. Likewise, he begins to see others differently. He finds that he cannot sincerely pray for his enemies without softening his heart toward them. He cannot pray for patience without becoming more patient. He cannot ask for love without learning to love. The transformation brought about by prayer is not always comfortable. There are times when prayer reveals unpleasant truths about oneself. A man may kneel in prayer expecting comfort, only to realize that he must first confront his own failings. He may ask for peace, but find that he must first seek reconciliation with those he has wronged. He may pray for joy, but be shown that his bitterness is the obstacle standing in its way. True prayer does not merely soothe, it refines. It is like fire that purifies gold, burning away impurities so that what remains is stronger and more beautiful. One of the greatest evidences of prayer's power to transform is seen in those who have practiced it deeply. The most faithful men and women in history were not necessarily those who had their prayers answered in the way they expected, but those who were changed by the very act of prayer. They became people of patience, of wisdom, of unshakable peace. They learned to trust even when their prayers seemed unanswered, for they understood that the purpose of prayer was not to control circumstances, but to be conformed to truth. The man who prays does not leave prayer unchanged. Whether he realizes it or not, each moment spent in prayer is shaping him. His desires shift, his heart softens, his understanding deepens. And though he may begin by seeking change in the world around him, he will come to see that the greatest change has taken place within himself. Prayer and faith are inseparably linked, for without faith, prayer is reduced to mere words, an empty formality devoid of substance. To pray is, by its very nature, an act of trust. It is the recognition that there is one who hears, one who understands, and one who, in his wisdom, responds according to what is right rather than merely what is requested. A man who prays without faith is like a traveler who embarks on a journey without believing there is a destination. His words may be spoken, but his heart remains unconvinced. True prayer must rest upon faith, not in the certainty of receiving what is asked, but in the certainty of the one to whom the prayer is offered. Faith in prayer is not the assurance of immediate or visible results. Many approach prayer with the expectation that faith guarantees a swift and direct answer, as though belief itself forces the divine hand to act. But faith in prayer does not mean that every request will be granted in the form one expects. Rather, it means trusting that every prayer is heard and that the answer, whether it be yes, no, or wait, is given with perfect wisdom. A child may ask for what he perceives as good, but a wise father does not give his child everything he desires. Instead, he provides what is truly beneficial, even if the child does not understand at the moment. So too, faith in prayer acknowledges that the wisdom of heaven exceeds the understanding of earth. One of the greatest tests of faith in prayer is found in silence. When a man prays and receives no immediate answer, he is tempted to believe that his prayer has been unheard or ignored. Yet faith understands that silence is not the same as absence. The delay of an answer does not indicate divine indifference, but rather divine intention. There are times when a prayer is answered not in the form of visible change, but in the quiet work of shaping the one who prays. A man may ask for strength, and instead of being relieved of his burden, he finds his endurance growing. He may ask for direction, and rather than an immediate sign, he is given patience to walk forward in trust. Faith in prayer does not demand immediate results, it rests in the assurance that even in waiting, God is at work. Faith also plays a role in the very act of approaching prayer. Many refrain from praying because they believe their words are too weak, their hearts too troubled, or their sins too great. They imagine that prayer requires a certain level of holiness before it can be offered, as though the divine ear is attuned only to the voices of the righteous. But true faith in prayer recognizes that one does not pray because he is worthy, but because he is in need. The weary, the broken, the uncertain, these are the ones who are called to prayer, not because of their strength, but because of their dependence. A man does not refuse to breathe because he is weak, rather, his weakness makes breathing all the more necessary. Likewise, prayer is not reserved for those who feel strong in faith, but is most needed by those who struggle. Doubt often seeks to undermine faith in prayer, whispering that because outcomes are uncertain, prayer itself is futile. Yet true faith is not the absence of doubt but the choice to trust in spite of it. A man who waits for perfect certainty before he prays will never pray at all. Faith in prayer is not the assurance of always understanding the plan but the willingness to trust in the planner. It is the belief that even when the path is unclear, the one who guides is never uncertain. Another vital aspect of faith in prayer is perseverance. It is easy to pray once and abandon the practice when answers do not come swiftly. But faith does not measure prayer's value by speed of response. The man who truly believes continues to pray, not because he is trying to force an answer, but because he trusts that prayer itself is shaping him. Perseverance in prayer is not about changing God's will, but about being willing to be changed by it. The soul that persists in prayer learns to submit, to trust, and to wait with hope rather than impatience. Faith in prayer also alters the way one perceives life's trials. A man without faith may see suffering as meaningless and unanswered prayers as evidence of divine neglect. But the one who prays in faith sees trials as part of a greater purpose. He understands that hardship is not a sign that he has been abandoned, but an opportunity to grow in endurance. He does not view delayed answers as rejection, but as moments in which his trust is being strengthened. Faith in prayer teaches the heart to rely not on visible circumstances, but on the unseen reality of divine wisdom. There is a mystery in prayer that faith alone can accept. The one who prays may not always understand why some prayers are answered swiftly while others seem to linger unanswered. He may not comprehend why some receive healing while others are called to endure. But faith does not require complete understanding, it requires trust. The man who prays with faith does not demand explanations from God, but rests in the assurance that even what he does not see is guided by a hand greater than his own. Faith in prayer is not about controlling outcomes, but about yielding to the one who holds them. It does not insist on a particular answer, but trusts that whatever the answer may be, it is given in perfect wisdom. It does not falter when prayers seem delayed, but finds strength in the very act of waiting. And most of all, it does not depend on feelings or visible signs, but on the unshakable truth that every prayer is heard, and every heart that seeks in sincerity will never seek in vain. The very act of prayer acknowledges that there is a higher authority, one whose knowledge surpasses human understanding. A man who prays is, whether he realizes it or not, confessing that his own wisdom is insufficient. He recognizes that there is one who sees beyond the present moment, who understands the end from the beginning, and whose decisions are not swayed by fleeting emotions or limited perspective. To pray rightly, then, is not to demand but to trust, to place one's requests before the divine, not with insistence, but with the humility to accept whatever answer is given. There is a tension within prayer, for it exists in the space between human longing and divine sovereignty. A man may pray earnestly for relief from suffering, for the healing of a loved one, or for the resolution of a hardship, and yet find that his request is not granted in the way he expected. In such moments, he faces a choice, to see prayer as futile because it did not yield the desired result, or to see it as an instrument by which he is drawn deeper into trust. Prayer does not always change circumstances, but it always changes the one who prays. It is in the act of bringing one's heart before the divine that transformation occurs, not necessarily in the world outside, but in the soul within. This interplay between prayer and divine will is most evident in the reality that God's answers are not always what one desires, yet they are always what one needs. A man may pray for ease, but instead, he is given strength. He may ask for success, but instead, he Leah. The difficulty in accepting divine will through prayer is that human nature is bound by limited vision. A child, when denied something he longs for, may believe his father is withholding good from him, unaware that what he desires would ultimately cause him harm. So too, man in his finite understanding often struggles to see that what he asks for is not always what is best. True prayer, then, is not merely the presentation of requests, but the willingness to trust that the one who answers does so with perfect wisdom. Another aspect of this interplay is the shaping of human desires through prayer. The one who prays consistently will notice that over time, his prayers begin to change. Where once he asked only for comfort, he now asks for growth. Where once he sought his own way, he now seeks to understand the divine way. This is the quiet work of prayer. It does not only bring requests before God, it reshapes the one who prays, aligning his heart with that which is higher than himself. There are those who wonder whether prayer has any purpose if God's will is already established. If the divine plan is set in motion, they ask, then why pray at all? Yet this question misunderstands the nature of prayer. Prayer is not about altering divine will but about participating in it. It is not a passive resignation but an active engagement in the reality that God's purposes unfold not apart from human lives, but through them. The man who prays is not merely an observer of the divine will, he is a participant in it. One of the greatest challenges in prayer is learning to accept not only the answers one desires, but also those one does not. There are prayers that remain unanswered for years, hopes that seem unfulfilled, and petitions that appear to be met with silence. Yet faith in prayer is not the assurance that one will receive all that is asked, but the certainty that no prayer is ever wasted. The one who hears is not indifferent, and even in the waiting, there is purpose. Prayer is a dialogue in which human will and divine will meet, not in conflict, but in communion. The one who prays does not seek to control the divine, but to trust in it. He does not measure the success of his prayers by the number of answered requests, but by the deepening of his trust, the transformation of his heart, and the peace that comes not from getting what he wants, but from knowing that he is held by the one who truly knows what is best.